Robert Costa, I'd like to begin with you and your beat, which is spending a lot of time on Capitol Hill. Do people in Congress seem to comprehend the gravity of what starts tomorrow, or is this going to be more of a rolling gravity situation, if you will?
At the Capitol today, walking around the halls of the Senate, by the trains, over at the House of Representatives, it's clear that lawmakers in both parties understand the gravity of this moment. An impeachment process, the president of the United States, his presidency on the line. The challenge for both parties is how is this going to play nationally as we go into a re-election year for President Trump? Democrats believe this is the critical phase, the public phase, to tie all this testimony that reporters have poured over and let the average citizen who's out there working hard at a job or with their family to now digest this information in a way that's understandable about a country they may not follow on foreign policy in an incremental way, Ukraine.
Carol, this may be unanswerable, but if it's answerable, there's no one better than you to take the question. What might we hear for the first time tomorrow that we don't know is coming up, that we haven't heard heretofore?
I think really what's important that you're going to hear tomorrow, Brian, is a more cohesive version. Aligned with what Bob outlined so well just now, is you're going to hear basically chapter one of what the House Democrats believe is their best evidence for impeaching the president and establishing a huge evidential sort of brick about why the president abused his public office, his presidential powers, for his personal gain. In most public offices, that would be reason to charge someone with extortion or bribery. And what the Democrats are going to lay out is chapter one, and that is State Department officials who were hearing from people inside the White House and completely flummoxed that the president was essentially holding over the head of Ukraine $400 million in military aid, not releasing it unless they were willing to do an investigation that would help him and harm Democrats.
Shannon Pettypiece, is there a de facto hotline from Republicans in the House and Senate to the White House that could be used to set up a kind of telephonic war room, at least some kind of real-time response to what we see starting tomorrow?
Well, if there was more coordination and organization within the White House, that certainly could be possible. But as I have reported and we have talked about before, the White House has really been struggling to come up with a strategy for how to handle impeachment. But the White House has been talking with their allies in Congress for a while now about trying to come up with a strategy and what the best messaging should be for tomorrow. And one thing the White House is hoping will come out of this is ability to distance the president from these witnesses. So no matter how damning their testimony is and how salacious maybe the things they say will be, Republican members will say, well, did you have any conversation with the president directly about this? Well, no, this was things that they had heard is what the Republicans on this committee are going to push for. So to say that these witnesses had no direct information about what the president was thinking or any direct conversations with the president on this. At least that's the hope out of this. But of course, the White House, they have a whole day of counter-programming scheduled to try and counter this. As you mentioned, the Turkish president is there, which on any other day would probably be the lead headline story, given the controversy around this visit in Turkey and Congress working on sanctions. There's a possibility some members from the Senate will be at the White House tomorrow simultaneously with this Turkish visit, possibly a meeting between some of the big Turkey hawks on the Hill and Erdogan. You know, potentially that could be in the works. And of course, the Trump campaign, and maybe a silver lining in all this, they're going to have about 20 staffers working rapid response on this. And they're hoping this will be a big fundraising day for them tomorrow, as they have seen for other days like the Mueller testimony, like the big impeachment House vote that appear to be harmful for the president, but are really used by the campaign to rally his base and raise a ton of money.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.